I've seen a few images in the last few days, few weeks, of election victories across towns in northern England.
What you're specifically talking about is Islamic voting. I don't think we've voted on religious lines since the Civil War. I mean, I think we've stepped backwards. People that disagree with Britain are wrong. The people that disagree with democracy are wrong. The people who believe you can rip apart the family and amputate the genitals of the mentally ill are wrong. The people who think that property rights are a bad thing are wrong. And in the end, sanity will prevail. I am absolutely confident we will win. You go to some of the working class communities in this country, they remain British, they remain loyal. We are not a joke. The free, independent people of Europe will continue. You'll never be as good as the Anglosphere, but we're willing to be polite nonetheless.
My name is Stefan Tompson, and I'm here with Visegrad24 in London, and I'm with André Walker from TalkTV. André, great to have you here.
Well, I want to welcome you to my house, which is, it overlooks the entire city. You know, you just can't get 30,000 square feet of central London for anything under 20 million these days.
Yeah, correct. André, I want to ask you, what are the three biggest issues that the UK is facing right now? If you had to identify three big problems, I think one of them you've touched upon is the real estate price.
No, actually,
really
do you know all three of them I think would be democratic deficit, because we can talk about immigration, we can talk about cost of living crisis, we can talk about Britain's role in the world, we can talk about the fact that our politicians have let us down, but the reality is we have so far departed from a genuinely democratic system in the United Kingdom that we're really starting to struggle. If you think about it, right down from the Saxon law to the Magna Carta to Parliament and all of those things work towards an ability of the British people to express their views, but to be governed rather than ruled. And now, through executive agencies, and now through overbearing government, and now through social security, the NHS, and all of these things, time and time again, an Englishman's home is not his castle. And actually, we are in the midst of a crisis whereby, for the first time, I think, in the history of this nation, we are being told what to do by an incompetent and overbearing government. 44% of GDP is spent by the government. So what that means, very simply, is this. If you're wondering why you can't pay your household bills, it's because there's a public sector worker earning almost as much as you with his own family, and you're paying for it. You personally are paying for it. Now, I'm going to tell you something that's going to really shock you. There are 4,000 executive agency appointments in the United Kingdom, and in the past 6 years, 3 of them were offered to Conservatives. One of them, the chairmanship of the BBC, was later taken back. Another one to Toby Young was rescinded, and another one to Sir Roger Scruton was rescinded. And so what that means is the Conservative members, the people who actually represent the elected government in this country, got 0 of the executive appointments, and they're all over the place. Ofcom, Ofwat, Ofgem, all these regulators. Parliament no longer has any power, and it's not government by experts. That's what the left want you to believe. It's government by extremists. These people are being dragged in on their hobby horse issues, and they're absolutely destroying us. Look at Transport for London, that great institution, great so-called. But of course, they've now brought in a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. They've throttled the city in order to defend their friends in the tube. We have seen, well, what else? The energy regulator's got a price cap that goes up every time the industry asks it. By the way, our energy bills have doubled because of the green energy nonsense that they're bringing in. We look at Ofcom, the regulator of this building. They wouldn't know broadcast law if it bit them on the backside. And yet, what have they said to us? I'll tell you what they've said this week. No politicians on during the election. No MPs on during the election. No former MPs on during the election. No assembly members, no mayors, no councillors, none of them. Channels like ours can broadcast. All the people left, trade unionists and left-wing charity officials. This country is dying under a burden of regulation. Now, if you want me to give you 3 things, I can say tax, I can say immigration, I can say the NHS, but it would be bullshit. And the reason it would be bullshit is because the democratic deficit in this country is killing this country. I'm going to go further. I believe that this is almost like the fall of Rome. The empire that we built across the Anglosphere, because I'm sorry to say to your very lovely colleagues in continental Europe, We talk about Western values. Screw it. The French don't support democracy. The Germans have had some bad things in the past, and Eastern Europe was dominated by communism. It is the Anglosphere that has brought freedom, liberty, and property rights to the world, and that is under attack. If you look at it now, President Xi of China's bad, but Trump's worse. Trump's a racist against Muslims. President Xi of China has 2.5 million Muslims eating rats in concentration camps, but Donald Trump's worse for a few off-colour remarks. What is the problem with Donald Trump? Donald Trump wants the Anglosphere to continue to reign freedom across the world. Why is it vital to destroy the United Kingdom, carve it into bits, and send the rest to Brussels? Because it defends freedom and liberty. Why do they want to overrun Australia? What is this idiot Trudeau? By the way, first black Prime Minister of Canada. This idiot Trudeau turns around, he is deliberately destroying Canada. Why? Because he's from the French tradition, where the experts rule. Democracy is nonsense. Hey, look, you can't tell me that Trudeau's a Canadian patriot. The man hates the country.
I don't know if he's destroying Canada because he's of the French tradition. That's an interesting take.
He does not understand why his country is rich and successful. He hates everything that has made his country rich and successful. And so it goes on and round and round. And we've got young people today. You could probably spit them out these windows, and by God, I've tried. We have young people today who are sitting round and convincing themselves that when Hamas ripped the heads off civilians, shot people in the street, Israel's the problem. Do you know what we need to start saying to the world? We need to start saying, congratulations, you're a savage. If you believe in throwing homosexuals off buildings, congratulations, you're a savage. If you don't believe in democracy, congratulations, you're a savage. If you've got anything good to say about President Xi of China, congratulations, you're a savage. We need to stop copying the bad people and return to first principle. So in this election, let me tell you, they're all crap, but we need to bring democracy back.
But it's just to sort of go backwards. I mean, there's a dissonance between wanting to lecture people about things and being unable to actually enjoy the very democracy that you want to export outside. How do you bring back democracy to the United Kingdom in that case?
It's really simple.
Or rather, the democracy that you would like to have?
It's incredibly simple. And we talked about it in 2010, and I don't understand why David Cameron didn't adopt it, not in 2010 because he was in coalition, but in 2015, the Great Repeal Act. Every single piece of legislation passed by Tony Blair and Gordon Brown's governments repealed in one go. All of the executive agencies gone, all of the quangos gone, all of the public, the bloody Supreme Court. Parliament is supposed to be supreme. We've got a frigging Supreme Court. Nobody knows what it does other than overreaches itself. All of these bastardizations need to disappear. And can I tell you, it's one line. That this House does approve the repeal of every bill passed from 1997 to 2010. Boom. I shocked you.
I don't know if it really would be that simple. I hope.
Why not?
I don't know. I hope you're right. I hope you're right.
Look, at the end of the day, the trade union fatties that are in all these quangos,
the reason I don't think it would work, is that even if you do repeal all of this, I don't think it changes the opinion of the sort of, Iron House Yeti has this interesting way of calling these people Mr. Consensus. I don't think it changes the opinions of all these people who've captured these institutions. This is why I don't necessarily think it would work.
That's not the point. The point is this. As it stands, we are in a general election, and I guarantee you there's no point in voting. I guarantee you nothing will change. I remember when I worked in local government, people used to say it's vital you vote because you make decisions locally. Do you hell? It's all passed down from European decrees and European rules. In this country now, if you want to make a change, get yourself appointed to a quango. But let me tell you this. I've got a very good friend of mine, and he wanted to be a magistrate. Now, that's not a quango, but okay, fair enough. He said to me, no, I wasn't approved. They said I'd passed, but I didn't fit the diversity quota. And I said to him, you've written the application wrong. And he said, why? I said, because what you will have written was, after getting my master's from Cambridge, I went in and founded one of the most successful car dealerships in Britain. I now want to give something back to the community. You should have written, as a lesbian, I understand. Then they'd have approved you. because all of these positions are all given to people who don't want to do anything. They want to represent something, and those are killing. So look, you know what? When we abolish all these quangos and the fatties have to go somewhere else, they'll still go to the BBC. We can sell that. But I think the idea that one day MPs are going to go into Parliament and vote and it's going to make a difference, that's the start. There is no point in voting in this election because Labour win every time. The left win every time. The Wokerati win every time. You know what? Most people don't want their kids dressed up in a frock, right? Most people don't want their sons wearing knickers and attempt to have their private parts amputated. Nobody cares about that because the Wokerati.
But this is an interesting point that you bring up because you say most people, and I've actually held that belief for a while myself, but I'm starting to question whether we're actually correct when we assume that most people don't want that.
Right.
Why is it?
I can cite
if most people don't want that, then why is it that the institutions have been hijacked by people with those beliefs, and why is it there's so few people actually standing up to it?
But you've answered the question. Because all the institutions have been hijacked. The reality is, there has never been an opinion poll in this country that has said we want uncontrolled immigration.
Sure.
There has never been
absolutely.
an opinion poll in this country that says we want to amputate...
I don't think there's been one in any European country for that matter.
We want to amputate the genitals of the mentally ill and put them in dresses. Nobody has ever said that's a good idea. And you answered the question in the question by saying the institutions have been captured. Now,
but
that
why
is a problem.
But Andre, but the institutions have been captured. When we make that argument, why is it that people with sane opinions, classical liberal values, why have they not captured the institutions? Why is it that the nut jobs have?
Yeah.
Do you see? Right?
I do completely. So I think that there are layers of answers. I think one of them is, the political hinterland of the right is business. The political hinterland of the left is the state.
Correct.
Therefore, they're more naturally likely to get in there. I think the other thing is, we have made a huge mistake, you and I, which is to allow ourselves to be beaten in on the allegation of being racist, right? I believe that what has happened time and time again is the left has been able to brand us in a certain way that destroys us. So what happens, right? If you are a crackpot from the National Union of Students, obviously you want to get appointed to all these quangos, but actually your dad and my dad just doing the normal job, bringing their kids up, paying the bills, they get involved, and the minute they say anything off colour to the left, you're a racist, you're a sexist, and then try and get them destroyed financially and have their reputation. They don't touch it. We have been successfully bullied. That's why Steve Bannon said at a speech in, I think in Paris, we need to embrace the word racist. And I'll tell you why. Not because we are racist, but because they're only saying it to bully us out of public office. Now, I would argue that the positions have been deliberately created in order for the left to subvert democracy. You can say institutions have been captured. It's probably somewhere in between.
Sure. When we talk about the transformation that we've seen in the UK, obviously I grew up here. I went to university here, and I can remember about 10 years ago when I was graduating from university, the change that had taken place amongst students, and it was the beginning of these extreme wokeists, and we had the beginnings of, but it was still a decent education
and
with
people
some
are
degree
laughing
of critical thinking and some laughter. All of that has disappeared, and it does appear that the youth, Western educated youth, holds incredibly irrational views, and we see it around the Israel-Hamas war, we see it around a variety of other things, including their views on migration. So is there, in your opinion, how much hope can we possibly have for the future when we have a generation that is growing up with completely different values to ours and seemingly no common sense?
Well, look, I think the Jewish community at the moment is extremely rattled, but I speak to people who make the point, look, if we're overrun, we're going to Israel, where are the Brits going? And I think that is a genuine concern. I think it is worth pointing out that England is not cities, it's towns. And actually, the vast majority, I think almost every town I could probably think of, remains incredibly British. So I think we've got that. I think uncontrolled immigration is dangerous, and we can't assimilate people quickly enough, but we could stop the boat. We won't, but we could stop it. I think the real problem with young people today is that they're liars. And I'm going to explain why. Because I do not believe that you, if you went to university, actually believe that pulling down a statue of some guy who died 150 years ago and filming it on a phone made by a 9-year-old in a prison camp in China makes you anti-slavery. I don't believe you believe that. I believe what you think is, I've got to look good in front of my friends, the classic virtue signal. There was a story, funnily enough, in one of the papers, it might have even been, I don't know which one it was, but about the guys who went on the vegan protest, the Extinction Rebellion protest, and went to McDonald's afterwards. That is a wholly, and they were being mocked, that is a wholly rational thing to do. You don't give a toss about any of these subjects, but you're not going to get a girlfriend at university unless you pretend. So you all turn up and then you go, bugger this, I'm not eating that junk, I'm having a Big Mac. It makes perfect sense. Now, tyranny is, let me tell you, tyranny is when everyone lies to each other. I am going to be arrested and I'm going to be convicted. The police are going to knock on my door and they're going to say that I falsely claimed somebody with a penis is a man, and I'm going to have a choice as to whether to go to the court when the police lie and say somebody with a penis is a woman. Do I agree with them and lie myself? Do I go to the court and agree with them? Do I save myself by apologising for this false statement that a woman can't have a cock? Do I do that? Maybe, and many people will. But tyranny is when we all lie to each other. When the police tell the courts that a man is a woman and a woman is a man, and everyone agrees, that is dangerous. And what has been captured is the language of all these things. And what has been captured is the direction of travel. You can't say that, culture. We've got to smash it. And I have to say to young people, what I would do if I was the British Prime Minister now, I would create a new criminal offence. You know, Tony Blair created 400 new criminal offences.
I didn't know that.
Including
I didn't know that.
Murder by act of nuclear explosion, because we really needed that on the statute. Because prior to that, it was legal to have a nuclear bomb and set it off and kill someone. But here's the law that I would put in. Conspiracy to prevent free speech on campus. 5 years minimum term. Oh, give that to them. Tell those smelly lecturers and all those entitled kids and start locking them up. You attempt to prevent free speech on campus, or you conspire to attempt to stop free speech on campus, you're going to prison. And by the way, it's category A, and I'll tell you the reason, because it's one step below treason. As far as I'm concerned, lock them with the lags of D-Wing. They'll have an arsehole the size of my arm by the end of it, and that's what they deserve.
The interesting thing is, I actually...
Arsehole was too much, right?
I disagree with you about the youth and your diagnosis of the youth, where I actually think that the true danger lies in the fact that many of these young people fundamentally believe that their cause is just and that they're doing something that is right. And then the real danger is that many of them actually come from a good place of wanting to implement change. I truly believe they come from a place of empathy. I really believe that.
Edward Colston, let me tell you something about Edward Colston, the slave trader.
Yeah.
They pulled his statue down and slung it in the river.
Yeah.
Edward Colston was a member of the Worship Company of Mercers. He was a cloth salesman.
Sure.
He made so much money selling cloth that he invested some money in the Royal Africa Company, a division of which traded slaves. When he retired, they made him the deputy governor. Do you know what that is? Thanks for your money. Here's a non-job. Come to the annual meeting.
Sure.
That is the reason for calling him a slave trader. Now, let's just compare that to what is going on in the warehouses of Amazon, where people walk 20... they don't give a shit. Come on. You can't pull down Edward Colston's statue and then film it on a phone. Film it on a phone made in a Lao guy.
The thing is, I think if you ask most of these kids
about slavery.
I think if you ask most of these kids, they wouldn't know who Edward Colston was. But I think they can.
Well, neither did I until they bored me with it for 6 months.
No, I understand that. But I do think that there is a true element of the left, and that is why I believe it is so dangerous, because these people fundamentally have an ideology and they are radical in in wanting to implement. I don't believe that they all come from this nonsensical position of we just want to.
You are telling me that Jeremy Corbyn's a good person.
No, I'm not saying he's a good person. I'm not saying he's a good person.
Can I tell you something?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying he's misguided.
By the way,
I'm saying they're misguided. It's a very different point.
This is a broadcast in Eastern Europe. Can I tell you something? We're talking about pulling down statues of people who were responsible for slavery. What about Karl Marx?
Oh.
1 billion people enslaved. I mean, I wouldn't do it because I don't believe in destruction of public art. But you know what? Karl Marx was the greatest inspirer of slavery of anybody in human history.
I absolutely agree. And his grave is right here in London. Edward
Colston was some mad old git who sold curtains.
No, I agree with you. But I do think that sort of brushing aside this entire generation, I think that one of the reasons that we're seeing the madness in this young generation is partially to do with the fact that essentially all the great struggles, Fukuyama describes this in The End of History, essentially says that if you eliminate all the need for necessary struggle, what you end up having is struggle for the sake of struggle. That appears to be very... Do you see where I'm going with this?
Okay.
And I think that doesn't necessarily come from a bad place and a place of... I don't believe that most of these young people I'm concerned about brushing aside all of their concerns, where they're seeking purpose, they're looking for a reason to fight, they're looking for a struggle to cling on to.
Hang on a second, right. I will tell you something that we forget, right? Whilst governments stood by and did precisely nothing, the people of Europe rose up and saved the Ukrainian government only for 2 or 3 days. And when they were open for business, then the weapons started arriving from NATO. Right. Where were these kids? Where were the people who were concerned about genocide? Where were the people who were concerned about racism? At one point, can I tell you something? I was a logistics boss running warehouses. I know nothing about this. I was one of the people that streamed over. Now, there's no point in pretending that I contributed more than the guy who picked up a gun. That would be nonsense.
Sure.
But all of these kids with all these institutes, all this ability to help, there was going to be a genocide in a European country. And do you know what they were doing? Spitting at a statue of someone that died 150 years ago. Don't give me this balls. They had an opportunity to defend freedom. They had an opportunity to oppose racism. They had an opportunity to defend democracy. They didn't give a toss. They were too busy flatulating over their vegan salads. Forget it. It's nonsense. Don't pretend you're serious about... Sorry, not you, but don't pretend you're serious about this. We stopped a genocide. That was the people of Europe. European Union stood by, did nothing. Governments in Europe stood by, did nothing. None of these kids were anywhere near the Polish border. None of these kids were anywhere... Do you know something? Moldova took 350,000 people.
It did.
It's one of the poorest countries in Europe.
Not just in Europe, on Earth. It's a very poor country.
I'll tell you what. How much help did the Moldovans get from the Do-Gooder Brigade? None. The Do-Gooder Brigade are making it for Instagram and TikTok. They're frauds. We should call them frauds. We should say, congratulations, if you have uploaded a Black Lives Matter, an anti-slavery or an anti-racism video, you're a cunt. Done. Simple. Easy. Next.
Okay. I mean, to be fair, I do see your point. I don't fully agree with it. I don't disagree with it. I just...
where was Cunt Aurelius Maximus in Ukraine? Well, we're very concerned about democracy. No, you're not. It's a war. You've got a fat git like me trying to run an aid operation with no idea, right? We managed it, okay, but none of them. The dreadlock. I tell you, on the Polish border, there was not a single dreadlock. There was not a single nipple piercing. You know, there was none of these stinky smellies. There was no Black Lives Matter t-shirts. They were all too busy uploading to TikTok how virtuous they were. Screw you.
Going back to the topic of British politics and of immigration, it's particularly interesting to us in Central and Eastern Europe, where we ourselves have gone from net migration countries. Obviously, the Poles migrated en masse to the United Kingdom. That has stopped. It's even actually shifted back.
Yeah, it's going back.
Many of them are going back. Poland's in an interesting position, where it's the 21st biggest economy in the world, uninterrupted economic growth for 27 years up until COVID, but generally just becoming a middle income country and doing well. It's attracting a lot of migrants, and our migration policies have been fundamentally changed over the last few years. And it'd be very interesting to hear from the perspective of someone here in the UK, where you've had mass migration for generations now, for 2 solid generations. What are some of the effects that you've been seeing? I mean, I just wanted to sort of I've seen a few images in the last few days, few weeks, of election victories across towns in northern England. You've seen some of them.
So what you're specifically talking about is Islamic voting.
Correct.
Yes. So obviously that's shocking to people. I don't think we've voted on religious lines since the Civil War. There has been, I think we've stepped backwards. I often say on my TV show, look, if we're enriching our culture, what part of the rich culture of Somalia did we love? What was the great bit of Pakistani culture that came here? And people, the food. Well, hang on a second.
It's always every single time is the food.
Culture is not food.
It's not.
As far as I'm concerned, the great Pakistani tradition of electoral fraud is now rampant in this country. The great Somalian tradition of racism is here. The great African tradition of female genital mutilation is here. Mutty magic. Well, you're not going to believe this. We even found a corpse of a very unfortunate child in the Thames who had been sacrificed by some crazed religion that had come over to Britain. Now look, when Poland joined the European Union, I did not agree with completely uncontrolled immigration because it was beyond...
And nor did I, from a British perspective, for that matter.
Can I tell you, the European Union is terrible, but the one thing it is good at is just making poor countries rich. It took Poland 5 minutes to go from Soviet dump, Warsaw Pact. Well, they signed in. They signed in.
Careful, André.
Listen,
I'm about to storm off this joke.
It didn't take them very long. There should have been some transitional arrangements.
I don't entirely agree with you in terms of how much the European Union did for the Polish economy.
Okay.
For that matter, there is uninterrupted economic growth from 1994 to 2004. The trajectory was already there. The structural funds undoubtedly helped Poland with our infrastructure.
Yeah, but it was access to markets that was a critical thing.
The thing is, the access to the market, it wasn't entirely positive because it did two things. To put it from the Polish perspective to you, the first thing that happened was that 2 million people left. And these were mostly, not just, some of them were obviously from poorer social spheres. The majority of them were educated at the cost of the Polish taxpayer and well-educated people who came to the UK, and they've since gentrified in the UK. If you look at the migration, the analysis has been done of Polish migrants here in the UK over the last 20 years, they've done phenomenally well as a group.
Oh, yes, they have.
They've got onto the property ladder, they've established businesses, etc. The group that arrived was young, entrepreneurial, and wanted to have children and wanted to assimilate and assimilated.
Can I tell you can I tell you a great Polish story? I've got a very good friend of mine who is not pro mass immigration.
Sure.
He's a farmer, and he said that the Poles had revolutionised his business. He said what used to happen was he'd get a phone call and they'd go, the British team would go, boss, the combine harvester's broke. We've phoned the engineer, but he can only come tomorrow. Well, he said, the bloody Poles didn't want to stop working. So he said, the Polish team come in. They phone up, they go, combine harvester stopped working. So we took the starter motor out the other one, we fixed it together. We've used the air conditioning spark plugs to put in, and we've continued production. And he said, it's just revolutionised my business. Look, inevitably, I'm going to say as a Catholic that it's, these are people who are more similar to our culture.
But I would agree with you that culturally there is a big divide between Central Eastern Europe and the UK. And there's also a big divide between the UK and continental Europe as a whole.
Here is the problem that we've got. Do not delude yourself into believing there is a financial benefit with immigration. I'm going to tell you what the Bank of England won't tell you. Every immigrant expands the economy. That is correct. Because literally, if somebody earns 20 grand a year and there wasn't a person doing that, that expands the economy by 20 grand a year. Anyone can tell you that. But they're net recipients of benefits. And so what happens is the economy appears to grow, actually probably does grow, but everybody gets poorer as a result. Now, the other problem that we've got is our society is starting to change. So what is happening to me is I'm becoming poorer in two respects. Tax is going up for the benefits that they take.
Sure.
And also housing is getting more expensive. So I'm becoming poorer, and I'm being thanked for my generosity by a group of people who say that their minor dispute in the Middle East should ensure that my Remembrance Sunday weekend is cancelled. Do you know, the British police, admittedly, the Ministry of Defence Police, not the Metropolitan Police, you know what their advice? At Britain's War Memorial, the Cenotaph, when these protesters were walking past, threatening to burn the Union flag.
No, what was it?
Take down the flag.
That's unbelievable.
Do you know what I'd have said?
Unbelievable.
Send in the army. Can I tell you something else? Islamists burnt down the office of the Member of Parliament for Finchley and Golders Green, and then they attempted to kill him 3 times. And he stood down as a Member of Parliament.
Mike Freer.
Mike Freer. So you know what I'd said? send in special branch. If it takes an armoured column, send an armoured column. And
That's how Jim Crow laws were abolished in the US. They simply sent the army, they sent the National Guard.
Listen, I will tell you what happened next. Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House of Commons, not a bad bloke. Wet as a lettuce, but anyway. He stands up and he says, I've had to change the constitution of the United Kingdom, namely the standing orders of the House of Commons, because if we do not do this, Islamists will murder MPs. Right. It hasn't taken us long, has it, from take down the flag to MPs standing down under threat of death, till the Speaker of the House of Commons, who, by the way, ordered the execution of the king for treason, to go down on one knee and beg the Islamists for mercy. That didn't take long. What's next? I'll tell you what's next. We are going to have to put a stop to this. I'm going to tell you, you asked me at the beginning of this interview, what are the three most important issues in this country? I didn't mention the Gaza anti-terrorism operation. Do you know why? It's a minor issue. There are people in this city living off the taxpayer pound who are not interested in this country. They are interested in their ludicrous Middle Eastern war against an ally of the United Kingdom. We should stop indulging these people. If you want to be a backward 7th century fascist, go to whatever shithole you crawled out of. But this is the United Kingdom. This is a forward-thinking, democratic and free nation. And do you know something? I don't want to pay you for the privilege of you coming here and trying to destroy that. So my advice to Poland about mass immigration is it is an absolute mistake. Poland was wrong, and the United Kingdom was wrong to allow 2 million people to leave Poland for the United Kingdom, though clearly the long-term damage has been mitigated by them moving back. Don't do it. I'll tell you something else. You know, there comes a point where you have to say to yourself, what is multiculturalism? You know something? At home, my fridge has got certain items in it. I've got a cake in there. I've got some curry in there. I've got some wine in there, some vodka and some cola. Imagine I said, I can improve every one of these dishes if I stick them all in the blender together, blend it and stick it in a bowl. It would be terrible. You know something? Some of the greatest cultures in the world were isolated. Look at Japan. Look at the city-states of Italy. We have not improved our culture. We have destroyed our culture, and we have paid for the privilege. And I'm sorry to say this once again to those young people. Look, I'm very sorry, but at some point, somebody has to ask whether it's actually free for me to order something off this phone and have it delivered tomorrow. It's not free. The cost is social security. The cost is free housing. The cost is uncontrolled immigration. The cost is the marginalisation of the working class. The cost is denigration of wages and destruction of our community. We need to stop telling big business that they can have all these people, pay half what they're worth, and destroy our communities in the process. Screw you, Jeff Bezos.
Do you have any hope, Andre?
Yeah. Of course I do. Of course I do. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I have hope.
Yeah. Because you're a Catholic.
No, the people that disagree with Britain are wrong. The people that disagree with democracy are wrong. The people who believe you can rip apart the family and amputate the genitals of the mentally ill are wrong. The people who think that property rights are a bad thing are wrong. And in the end, sanity will prevail. But we've got to stop those people who are making an awful lot of money off this continuing in their campaign. What is it that Dylan Mulvaney?
Sure.
Oh God, send it to Gaza to fight. Queers for Palestine. Be my guest. I'll pay for the ticket. And we've got to stop all of these organisations which are now in the grip of people who are destroying them. I said start with the Quangos. You said to me that won't be enough. Well, let's just start there, and then we can deal with the big city institutions that have been taken over by the left. I am absolutely confident we will win. You look around London and see where it is. You go to Lee, you go to Sunderland, you go to some of the working class communities in this country. They remain British, they remain loyal, and they have got no truck in this. And I'll tell you a final thing. My dad is a member of Lee East Labour Club, in the heart of the Lancashire coalfield, the heart of the Labour Party. Andy Burnham himself, the current mayor of Greater Manchester, was the MP there. Do you know, on a Saturday, if it's been your birthday that week, you have to buy every other member of the club a bit of food. And there are two options. There is a meat and potato pie or there is a meat and potato pasty. There is no vegan option. There's no vegetarian option. There's no pescatarian option. There's no gender-neutral toilets. They don't have a transsexual policy, and they don't have an LGBT representative because they think it's all a load of old bollocks. And that is the majority of this country, and I believe those people will prevail. We've had more people arriving from Pakistan in the past 18 months in this country than its entire history. We've got to shut the borders, at least to some extent, but we'll get there. We'll get there, and this country remains this country. Don't let them persuade you it isn't. You turn on the television, the people have been picked to be unrepresentative of this country. I get that. You know, my friend who's Ukrainian said to me at the end of the King's speech, but they've picked a choir based on the minimum number of white children there. And he thought that was very racist. Okay, we're with all that. But the majority of this country remains this country. The majority of Poland remains Poland. And I'll tell you, absolutely finally, always remember that when the worst offender of them all for being a genocidal, thief, maniac, anti-democratic demagogue, Vladimir Putin, tried to touch us, by God was he sent packing. That man was shitting his knickers as he started issuing threats about his modern media sat next to a fax machine. This guy is a joke. We are not a joke. The free, independent people of Europe will continue. You'll never be as good as the Anglosphere, but we're willing to be polite nonetheless. And I want to say to you, this obviously isn't my house. This is News UK. We want to thank the global community of Conservative viewers for supporting us at Talk, but supporting you as well. You know, that is the voice of the silent majority. Anything I can do to help you and help your viewers, I'm absolutely delighted to do it. And I hope you've enjoyed your visit today.
Andrew Walker, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.